It is far more risky to not have any Bitcoin than to have some Bitcoin. Priced in Bitcoin, everything is getting cheaper. You have something deflationary instead of inflationary, then why would you not want to have some stake in that? Your pounds are weaker, your euros are weaker, everything's weaker. But if you were to flip all these things into Bitcoin terms, they're all getting cheaper. Houses have never been in cheap in Bitcoin as they are now. I think right now, you could buy a median priced house in the USA, not a cheap country, for under 4 Bitcoin. And that's going to keep happening. I believe in the future, you're going to be able to buy a house for 0.1 of a Bitcoin. You know, every decade or two, you get generational opportunities, both in terms of technological innovation, but with that also come investment opportunities. So for all the people who think, oh, it's late, it's too late, it's over $100,000, it's too expensive, people need to kind of change their fiat thinking, to use that term, right? Stop thinking in terms of just dollars. Look at the market cap and look at the potential that it has to grow. You know, your future descendants are adults, and now, you know, Bitcoin is chilling at a 50 trillion, $100 trillion market cap. And they're like, why didn't my dad or grandfather buy any of this?
Hi, Zuby. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
I'm doing great, Robin. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Really cool. And I guess most people know you, Zuby. I think my first touch point with you was actually the music "Okay Dude." I think I heard that on Joe Rogan, and then I heard the song also. I think it was discussed on Joe Rogan. I don't know if it was with you actually or with someone else, but I heard it, and then I heard the song, and that was kind of my first touch point. And then later only I got to know you that you're also into Bitcoin. So maybe before we get started with all the topics, give the people that listen and watch a little bit of your background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Zuby. I'm an independent rapper, author, host of the Real Talk with Zuby podcast, and public speaker. I was born in England, grew up in Saudi Arabia, family background originally from Nigeria. I have been self-employed since 2011. I've been making music since 2006. So far, I've put out 9 albums and EPs over the years. I started my own podcast back in 2019. I've released well over 350 episodes so far. It's a weekly show. Interviewed a lot of people and been interviewed by a lot of people, from Elon Musk to Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, lots of people all over the world, all over the, not just the political aisle, but the cultural and social aisle. I've spoken at multiple Bitcoin conferences in Miami, in the UAE. I currently live in Dubai now. And I've been in the Bitcoin world since 2017. I first heard about it, like many people, probably a couple of years earlier than that, but I didn't really look into it until 2017. And once I did, to use the Bitcoin terminology, I was orange-pilled very quickly. And yeah, I've been in the game since then. Over time, the conviction has grown, and I've become more and more of an advocate for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is not my main thing, shall we say. A lot of people know me in the Bitcoin world. If I go to a Bitcoin conference, a lot of people will recognize me. But my main work over the last couple of decades has been in music and other forms of media.
I love that because sometimes we are a little bit too bubbly. Like, you know, there's really deep people in Bitcoin talking to other really deep people in Bitcoin. So it's always nice to have people that are into Bitcoin, understand the Bitcoin mission, but also have a big part of their life outside of just Bitcoin. I'm just Bitcoin literally. So that's all I do, every single day, every single minute. Maybe, for your understanding of how you got into Bitcoin, how it developed. What is your kind of bullish case on Bitcoin? I heard you talked about actually with someone comparing it to like generational wealth that we have as compared to someone like 100 years ago with real estate. That's something that I know of. How do you compare Bitcoin and how do you kind of see like what's the opportunity that lies into Bitcoin and why you spend time in Bitcoin?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, there's lots of different ways to approach this question. I'm sure that your listeners have heard 1,000 different responses to the, what is Bitcoin and what are the basics and fundamentals. So I'll come at it from a slightly different angle. I'm a millennial. I'm 38 years old. So I'm of the last generation that has lived our lives without the internet and without not just smartphones, but mobile phones, without social media and all of that. And then also we've lived in that world. So unlike Gen Z and younger, I totally remember the world pre-internet, basically, right? When the internet was just in its infancy, when people thought Amazon was going to fail, when people thought that Facebook was a stupid idea, all of these things, when people thought, oh, who needs a mobile phone, right? Not even a smartphone. I remember when my older sister, I remember when she got her first mobile phone, she was the first person in our family to do so. And at that time, most people didn't even have mobile phones or cell phones if you're American. So we've lived through all that. When I was a very small child, you couldn't even render a circle on a PC. You didn't have the graphical power to render a circle. So even if you look at something like video games, technology-wise, we've gone from, stickmen running around on a screen and a ball being a square or maybe an octagon if you've got high graphical fidelity, to what we have now with modern day PC gaming and PlayStation 5 and, Xbox Series X and whatever we're on, right? So just in the past, not even 40 years, I've lived through, people in my generation have lived through all of these shifts and changes. Of course, I'm in the music world. And when I released my first album in 2006, it was all physical media, right? Everything was CDs. CD sales were booming. Streaming didn't exist. No one had even heard of streaming. There was no Spotify. There was no Apple Music, any of that. Downloads then came in, and then legal downloads became popular. And then after that, into streaming. I remember when I was in school in digital photography, it was just starting to grow. When I was still in school, you'd take photos with a analog camera and you'd still go to the store and they'd put it in the red room, get the film developed. So we've lived through like an immense amount of technological change in a relatively short time. I'm not speaking as some old man here, but we've witnessed amazing technological change. And with that, I've seen a lot of opportunities. Being a young, being the age I'm at, I never was in a position to take advantage of the .com boom, let alone take advantage of the real estate boom prior to that and so on. And I do believe this is not necessarily a hard fact, but I believe that in every generation, every decade or two, you get generational opportunities, both in terms of technological innovation, but with that also come investment opportunities. And so coming off the back of what you sort of hinted at in the question, if you look at the baby boomer generation in lots of different countries, certainly across the West, real estate was like the obvious play. I'm sure you'll hear, lots of us will hear stories from our parents, for some people, maybe their grandparents, of how, I bought this house for £10,000 or however much, $20,000 in the 60s or in the 70s, and now it's worth like $1 million or whatever. That opportunity, we don't have that open to us. It doesn't matter whether you're in the UK, Canada, US, Germany, Australia, like that opportunity. Sure, you can still do well with real estate, but that type of asymmetric bet no longer exists in that field. Similarly, if you were to put some money into Apple stock or Amazon or Facebook or something now in 2025, I think all of those are probably still going to grow. There's still a way from them to run, but it's not like it would have been buying Apple stock back in the 1990s or buying Amazon stock in the 2000s or whatever. The asymmetric bet, it just isn't there. But what we have got with our generation, millennials, and I'd say Gen Z as well, is there's this whole, I say new world. I mean, 15 years is relatively new, but we have this thing called Bitcoin. And the way I see it, Bitcoin is I just think it's the most ridiculously asymmetric bet that exists in terms of investment. Now, Bitcoin is not purely a speculative asset, of course. It's many things to many different people. But from an investment standpoint, if you look at where it is right now, I mean, people are talking about, oh, wow, Bitcoin has crossed $100,000. People get stuck on the number, right? People like to always compare it to the dollar, and you think, okay, wow, a Bitcoin, let's say in 2017 was a couple $1,000. By the end of the year, it was about 20,000. Obviously, then it dropped down to about 3. It rose up to about 70, dropped down again to about 15. It goes through these cycles approximately every 4 years. But the opportunity is insane. So if you actually look at the market cap if you look at the market cap, which today I would guess off the top of my head is probably somewhere around $2.2 trillion. If you compare that to other assets and other asset classes, instead of focusing on the 100,000 or 118,000, 117,000, whatever price it is right now, if you think of what the market cap is, it has still barely scratched the surface of what it has the potential to do. If you look at something like gold, gold is 20-something trillion dollar market cap. Off the top of my head, I think equities is like, gosh, several hundred trillion. Real estate, I think also several hundred trillion. Like Bitcoin's 2 trillion. So even though it's run from being worth less than a cent all the way up to $100,000+, and someone might look at that and go, oh my gosh, I've missed the train. It's over. As far as I'm aware, the global adoption of Bitcoin right now in 2025 is only about 3 to 4%, meaning that 96 to 97% of the world's population does not have a single Satoshi. So for all the people who think, oh, it's late, it's too late, it's over $100,000, it's too expensive, people need to people need to kind of change their fiat thinking to use that term, right? Stop thinking in terms of just dollars. And if you are going to think in terms of dollars, look at the market cap. Look at the market cap and look at the potential that it has to grow. Now, there are going to be some people who are, by definition, most people in the world don't understand Bitcoin and most people don't have any. And even of the people who are somewhat familiar with it, a lot of them might be thinking, well, I'm not 100% sure about this. I don't totally get it. I prefer index funds. I prefer gold. I prefer real estate, all that. And look, one thing I want to say up front, people have the right absolutely to spend their money however they want. If they think if they look at Bitcoiners and they're like, you guys are absolutely insane, that's their prerogative. If, someone is just happy, I know people who have all their money just in the bank. Like they don't even invest in stocks, shares, anything, right? They don't even feel comfortable doing that. They just keep it all stacked up in a bank. I don't think that's a good way to allocate wealth, but people are free to do whatever they want. But even for the people who are, let's say, curious enough to listen to a podcast like this, curious enough to do a little bit of research, but they're not really totally sold, I think at this point, it's fair to say that it is far more risky to not have any Bitcoin than to have some Bitcoin. So if you don't have Michael Saylor levels of conviction, I'm not suggesting anyone go and, remortgage your house or sell all of your assets and put it all in Bitcoin or, take out a lot. I'm not recommending anyone to do that. I think your allocation should be proportional to your level of conviction. And obviously you shouldn't be, putting yourself or your family in some type of huge financial risk. I don't recommend that. But let's say, for example, let's imagine a future where Bitcoin reaches the market cap of gold. That would put a single Bitcoin at a dollar valuation of somewhere around close to $1 million, if my math is correct. I think I'm wrong. I think it would put it over $500,000. I think it would probably put it somewhere between 500 and 700,000, let's say. I know people say you're not meant to do math on live podcasts, but I think that is correct. So let's say you hit the point where a Bitcoin is worth $1 million. What's $1 million worth at that point? That's a whole other question. But let's say that happens, and you just, over all these years, you never decided to get off 0 Satoshis. Okay, then okay, cool. You're in a position now where you've missed out on you've just missed out on that opportunity, essentially, right? Now we've seen at each point, people are kind of kicking themselves saying, I wish I got in earlier. I wish I got in earlier. I wish I got in earlier. And it's just like, I would just encourage people to get off 0. Like get off 0. I mean, if you have nothing, it's, I don't know. Like, I think that is such a riskier position to be in. If you look at inflation, if you look at the world, if you look at the economy, if you just look at everything and then you look at Bitcoin and you see how actually priced in Bitcoin, everything is getting cheaper. You have something deflationary instead of inflationary, then why would you not want to have some stake in that? Let's say the other extreme scenario, right? I don't think Bitcoin can go to 0 because that doesn't even doesn't even make sense, because every single Bitcoiner would have to completely give up on it, and you can't even sell everything you have because there has to be someone buying. But people say, oh, Bitcoin's going to zero. Take the clueless people who are like, okay, let's say someone put in, I don't know, someone put in $5,000 in it, and then somehow, some way, I don't know, 10 years from now, it hasn't gone to $1 million, it's gone to zero. I don't know how that happens, but okay, cool. You've lost, you've lost a little bit of money. But what about the opposite? What if it goes to 5 million? What if it goes to 10 million? What if there actually is true hyper-Bitcoinization, and by the time my children are adults, or your future descendants are adults, and now Bitcoin is chilling at a 50 trillion, $100 trillion market cap, and they're like, why didn't my dad or grandfather buy any of this? Like, why? right? Like, imagine completely missing out on, just being a boomer who completely missed out on buying any real estate, being a Gen X who completely missed out on owning any tech stocks or any of that. I think this is an even bigger. It's a bigger opportunity, not just from an investment standpoint, but just in terms of, look, one of the only tech. If I think about this, if you want me to pause at any time, let me know. My brain is just running. I'm just thinking, if you think of almost any technology, pretty much all of them get better over time. I would say that money is one of the only technologies that is, excluding Bitcoin, if we're talking like fiat currencies, that's one of the only currencies it's one of the only technologies that is worse now than it was 100 years ago. It's worse now than it was 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, they were using more sound money than what we're using now, right? They were using gold, they were using silver, and then even when they brought in paper notes, they were still on gold. They were still on a gold standard, and so money is actually getting worse, and it's devaluing over time. So if you are just sitting on pounds, euros, dollars, literally any government issued currency, all of them over time trend towards zero. The best performing ones have lost over 90% of their purchasing power over the past century. Now, a century might sound like a long time to people, but a century is one long lifetime. Some of our grandparents have lived to around a century. So if you think of a century being like one lifetime, that is horrendous. Some of them have lost 99.99999% of their value. And that's just what happens. But because of the way the human brains work, we always think that what we perceive as prices going up is really currency debasement. It's the value of your money going down. So when people are typically saying, oh my gosh, groceries are so expensive, gas or petrol is so expensive, housing and rent is so expensive, school fees, university fees, all of these things are so expensive. Sometimes there is a demand-based factor which is increasing the price, but in many cases it's just that, nope, your dollar is just weaker than it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even 1 year ago. Your pounds are weaker, your euros are weaker, everything's weaker. But if you were to flip all these things into Bitcoin terms, they're all getting cheaper. Houses have never been in cheap in Bitcoin as they are now. I think right now you could buy a median priced house in the USA, not a cheap country, for under 4 Bitcoin, right? So a house that maybe a decade ago would have cost you maybe 1,000 Bitcoins, today it's going to cost you, I don't know, 3.8, 3.9, something like that. Again, people can fact check my math here. I'm just spitballing. But and that's going to keep happening. I believe in the future, you're going to be able to buy a house for 0.1 of a Bitcoin. And so, look, we have a very unique opportunity here. None of us are capable of predicting the future. But I think that Bitcoin is the best money that has ever existed. And money is such a fundamental, money is weird because it's one of those like topics that, people say you're not supposed to talk about. But but that taboo in itself is something that keeps people so financially illiterate, and it keeps billions of people poor. It keeps people broke because they don't even understand what money is. They don't understand how it works. 80% of the stupid criticisms you see of Bitcoin are because people don't even understand what money itself is. And that's a shame. But anyway, man, Robin, I've said a whole bunch of stuff here. I've probably answered your question and gone way, way, way beyond it. So I want to take a pause here and allow you to jump in and ask whatever you'd like.
I love that. You really went the whole circle, and I loved it from the starting to the end. So I did not even want to interrupt you. This was really cool, and it kind of shows this thing that I kind of want to show people also, where we have like if assuming we are right, I assume that now, then and we get to this hyper-Bitcoinization, Bitcoin is money, and all those things that we talk about. It will be even worse for people that haven't bought than for the people who haven't bought real estate or stocks, because a lot of people don't own assets. So you are like not one in the few, you are one in the many actually that don't have assets. As you mentioned, you also have friends that like have all the money in bank accounts, which I think is lunatic, but do all their own choices. So if we assume that, and I think Seyfried mentioned that, like the global money market, so the total addressable market for Bitcoin might be 400 trillion, might be 500 trillion, whatever the number is, really hard to say. You kind of have the situation where a Gen Z, a millennial could now buy Bitcoin for like a fraction of something they can buy it in like 10, 20, 30 years. And we have this weird meme, this really cool meme actually, where I think, was it with boomers or with baby boomers, buying real estate for free blueberries, and like the old people are dancing in those stand shops. Yeah, that's hilarious. And I think the same memes will be created of this early Bitcoiners, where we kind of bought Bitcoin, like this literally websites where you just click a button, give your email, and you got 10 Bitcoin back in the day. We're like, oh yeah, that's super easy to get, like 10 Bitcoin. Now 10 Bitcoin is like worth over $1 million. Back then you just have to put a fake email in there and you got it. So with that long story, it's like, yeah, why are still people on 0 Satoshis? I'm a lunatic. I'm 100% in Bitcoin. I don't own anything else. So I know why most people don't do my strategy. Why are people still saying like, oh, it will be banned by the government. Oh, it's bad for the environment. Oh, it's a risk and volatile. And like, yeah, like just buy some. And I'm curious what you think about that, because I hear you talk about mindset, and you talk with people that have gone to the top, literally with Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, all those people who literally are like up there, like almost you cannot really go higher than that. And you probably have seen also people on the other side where, okay, what is holding them back to take advantage of, if you get educated on obvious technology trends and obvious opportunities, where like, okay, the Bitcoin opportunity is so big. If I just put like $5,000 in there in 2015, in 2035, I will be so rich than some other entrepreneurs who worked really hard all their life. So it's like just risking a little bit of your own net worth, not holding it in the bank, might catapult you to a status where some other ones have to work all their lives to even get a fraction of that. It seems to be really hard for me now to argue for the side of like having no exposure to Bitcoin. So for you, and I know you talk sometimes about mindset and on those things around, why do you think it's so hard for people to not get at least some Bitcoin?
Wow. I think the answer is there's multiple things that are going on here. You have to remember that most people have no investments at all, right? Not just Bitcoin. Most people don't have any stocks. Most people don't have any real estate. Most people don't have any bonds. Most people don't have any investments at all, regardless of the investment vehicle. Now, why is that? Is it because they are poor or broke? That could be the case in some situations. I mean, even in the USA, most people don't have a couple $1,000s in savings. So if you don't have the money, I mean, how people spend their money and live beyond their means, that's a whole other conversation. That's clearly something that is going on, particularly in wealthier countries. But I think some of it is certainly the actuality or the perception that I can't afford it. Okay, I think that's a big one. I think for a lot of people, it's, well, I can't afford it. I don't have spare money. I don't have the money to invest in anything, let alone something like Bitcoin. I think that's a factor. So let me try to go through a few different scenarios. So I think that's a good chunk of people. I think there's another large group of people where they have the means. They might even be rich themselves. But most people are conservative, Robin. When I say that, I don't mean in a hard political sense. What I mean is most people are averse to change. Most people don't like to take risks. Most people don't like to go outside of their comfort zone. And beyond that, most people are followers. Most people are not leaders. Most people are followers. So unless there is an entity or an institution that they trust, and it could even be the government which they claim they don't trust, most people do trust it, they aren't going to make a move until their financial advisor or all the big banks or the guy on TV or their favorite politicians or whatever are telling them that it's okay. They're not going to make a move. Most people value the feeling of safety and security. So if something has volatility, Bitcoin is very, very volatile. We see that. Okay. It's possible that, who knows, 1 year from now, Bitcoin could be worth, 3 times what it's worth now. It could be worth half of what it's worth now. I don't know. You don't know. But that freaks people out. That freaks people out because on top of all this, most people think short term. If you tell someone, hey, look, try to think 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future, 30 years into the future, most people aren't good at that. We could ask the question, I think to answer this question, you'd need to be able to understand, like, why do people smoke? Like, why do most people eat more? Why do people eat more than they need? Why are there's more obese people in the world now than there are starving people? Why is 50% of the population in some countries, obese? In the USA, over 70% of the population is overweight. Why? Don't people know which foods are healthier and which one? Don't people know that if you eat more than you burn, you're going to gain weight? Like almost everyone knows that, right? But because people prioritize short-term pleasure, they still do it. People who win the lottery, most people who win the lottery, fast forward a few years and they're back to where they started financially. They're broke again. I mean, isn't that amazing? I'm sure if I gave you $5 million or $10 million, you wouldn't be broke in 5 years. Like, how's that? How? You know what I mean? But that's the reality. Most people who win the lottery, within a few years, they're broke again. So lots of people are financially illiterate. Lots of people are very risk averse. Lots of people are very prideful, which stops them from learning, right? There are people who they don't have Bitcoin because they're too prideful. They're too arrogant. I mean, sometimes you see them online, right? You see them on social media. For the past 8 years, they've been talking crap about Bitcoin. And instead of just taking the L and going, man, you know what? Maybe I got this one wrong. They just double down, triple down. They were calling it a scam at $800, calling it a scam at $8,000, calling it a scam. They're going to be calling it a scam all the way up to $8 million instead of just going, you know what? Maybe I was wrong here. Like maybe I should pause and I should listen to some of these people and I should do some research. But this is just human pride. It's ego. It gets in the way. None of us like being wrong. That's just part of humanity, right? Like, we have our convictions, we have our beliefs, we have the things that we think are true. And it's not comfortable to be proven wrong. It's not comfortable for someone to say, actually, no, you're not correct. And here's why. It's not comfortable to see, this train pulling away and going off, and you decided not to get on the train because you said the train was a scam. And instead of going, okay, you know what, I'll board the train a little bit later. If people feel more comfortable just saying, nope, I'm going to just maintain that the train is a scam and eventually it's going to crash and so on. And so I think all of this combination of factors plays into it. So I don't think it's one single thing. It's not just like, oh, everybody is stupid or everyone's uneducated or whatever. It's a mix of things. There are people who are, financially illiterate. There are people who just feel like they don't have the money and they don't understand the concept, right? So if you tell them the price of Bitcoin and they're like, man, I don't have, they'll say, oh, I don't have $118,000. Right? They don't even understand that you can buy just $5. You can buy $10. You can buy 50. A lot of people don't even understand that because that shows you how early we still are. I find myself explaining to I found myself explaining to extremely intelligent people, very educated people who don't even know that Bitcoin is divisible, right? They think you have to transact in whole Bitcoins. And so there's the education to be done, but people have to be curious. People have to humble themselves and just take some time and be like, you know what, I'm going to learn about this thing. And I'll tell you something that served me well in my life, Robin, is whenever I see people who I know to be very, very smart and not hive-minded, who have been right about a lot of things, when a lot of those people are paying attention to something, I've learned that it's always worth at least doing some research at a minimum, right? It doesn't mean you have to jump on board with whatever they're saying or you have to throw money into whatever they're saying. But if a lot of very, very, very smart people who are outperforming the population by a factor of 1,000, 10,000, a million sometimes, when they're like really interested in something and they're talking about something, it's always worth going, okay, this is something worth at least paying attention to. To give another example, right now, like I'm not someone who's super into like AI and artificial intelligence and stuff, right? Like I'm a computer science graduate. I know about AI, but I'm not one of those people who's like super hardcore crazy on AI. But at the same time, it would be very, very foolish to not pay any attention to it at all. Okay? Like there's all of these very smart people who are looking into it, researching it, investigating it, using it, right? To just sit there and be like, well, I'm not even gonna, it's just a scam. It's bad. I'm not even gonna look at it. I mean, that's dumb. There's a level of pride which is impossible to differentiate from stupidity. It basically ends up being the same thing. And so when that is happening, I just think it's always good to go, you know what? Like it's worth at least having a look at this. Let me at least do some research. Let me try these tools. Let me play around with it. Let me at least see what is going on. If after all that you decide, you know what, it's still not for you, that's one thing. There are people who have really actually done a deep dive on Bitcoin and they genuinely do understand it, at least on a basic to intermediate level, and they're not really convinced and they want to put their money elsewhere or they want to invest in something different. I'm like, that is much better to me than the people who just won't be bothered. They're just like, nope, you're just wrong. I'm right. You're wrong. I've done no research. I know nothing about it. I'm saying all this ignorant stuff, but I'm going to just do what I do. Like, I just think that's silly. But at the same time, people are going to do what they're going to do. And I think guys like yourself, the best you can do is to try. I'm sure you've heard the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? You can try, you can do your best to talk to people, put out information, spread knowledge, explain your position, explain your conviction. And there will be a small percentage of people who hear the message and take some type of action. The truth is that most people won't, and it doesn't even matter what you're talking about. You could be talking about health and fitness. You could be talking about how to make money. You could be talking about how people can live a happier life, how people could save more money, take better care of their family, whatever. The truth is most people aren't going to listen. And even those who listen, most people are not going to take action. And I don't know why that is, Robin. I've been trying to work this out my entire life. I don't know why human beings do a lot of things that I do not. I really don't understand. Like if people were rational, then a lot of stuff wouldn't exist in the world. The world would look very different. But here we are. And I don't think it's worth getting frustrated over. I think it's natural to go through that phase where like you've got such a conviction and you're so passionate that like you get frustrated or even angry by like people not getting it. But I think at some point you kind of reach this piece where you're just like, okay, some people like to say have fun staying poor. I try not to use that phrase, but it's it does have some truth to it, right? Or, when people say, well, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. If you've been hearing about it since it was 1/10 of the value that it is now, or 100th of the value it is now, and you've just been ignoring, and then you're going to let it go up another 5x, 10x, maybe 20x. By the time it's over 1 million, now you're suddenly interested and you want to jump on board. that's ultimately up to the individual.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. And we have right now a summer sale going on for 15% off. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today for $186. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need.
And this meme has a lot of truth in there, so it's really hard to not use it. But yeah, I agree that it's kind of, it comes from, I feel like it almost comes from a bad place of sitting on the high horse of saying like, oh, like I get it, you can stay poor and all those things. Like it assumes that you're right. And I try not to do that, but it has a lot of truth in there. And for orange pilling, I like that because I completely switched my orange pilling strategy of being just a passive educator. I've made it abundantly clear on social media and everywhere that I'm a Bitcoin guy. So if you want to learn about Bitcoin, you can come to me, and then my family all knows about that. And every now and then there's a family member that comes to me and says like, hey, like, what's that Bitcoin thing? Like, how can I get involved? And then I explain to them everything, but I completely stopped orange pilling people, like, which is weird. I have a podcast on Bitcoin and I guess I still do it here, but in real life, like I don't bring Bitcoin up. Bitcoin, if Bitcoin comes up and people spread weird information about Bitcoin, I'll correct them, but I won't bring it up. I'm not selling Bitcoin, so why should I sell someone on Bitcoin? And it's interesting what you said with smart people. I think Gary Cardone and you are actually the only people that talked about that on my podcast in now over 500 episodes, where he said also similar to you, he saw so many smart people coming into Bitcoin that he's like, oh shit, I really have to pay attention to this thing. Otherwise I might get left behind. And
this thing that, and I've shared it 100% with you, that independent thinking, I think that's maybe a critical thinking in general. That's so hard and rare. Like it's something that if I see it in someone and I see it in a person, I really want to like hold on to that person. And I'm like, oh yeah, like you, please stay in my life, because it's very rare and very hard to find that someone is truly independent, truly thinking for himself. And yeah, we always have some group thinking. Like even the most independent thinking people always have some kind of group settings. We're like animals in that regard. But there's a scale to how group thinking are you? How independent thinking are you? And it's a good comparison. I've never thought about that with why don't people get Bitcoin? Yeah, like why are people are obese? Like why are they not getting that? You should work out a little bit, get some movement in every day, and eat less than you burn.
People don't like change, Robin. This is what I'm saying. People don't like change. Even getting imagine, just trying to get someone to leave a job that they hate or move to a different city, even if they don't like where they live, let alone move to a different country, right? Like the resistance against it, even if it's something that is going to objectively make their life better. Most people, like there's just a real difficulty with that. And, in terms of the independent and group thinking, let me try to think of this in the most sort of compassionate way. I think that the reason we are like that is because if you think about it, if everybody was a super independent critical thinker, the world wouldn't really be able to function. If everyone was an entrepreneur, how would the world work? It wouldn't. Like you can't just have entrepreneurs. You can't just have everyone is a leader type personality. Everyone is an entrepreneur. Like nothing would get done. People wouldn't be able to cooperate. You wouldn't be able to form teams, form companies. You wouldn't be able to have a military because everybody wants to be the sergeant, right? Everyone wants to be the commander. And now you have no soldiers. Right? So I think that's why there's like this natural distribution of these personality types. So I think no matter the country, no matter the time in history, no matter the sector, there are always going to be far more follower types than there are leaders. And even if we think about ourselves, there will be areas in your life where you're very much like an independent critical thinker. But then there will be other areas, of course, where you do what the majority does. And actually that's like the best and the right thing to do. Okay. Like if you're just being super independent, like if you're just driving on the road and you're just like, you know what, I'm going to just like ignore, I'm not going to follow the rules, right? I'm just going to do like whatever I want to do. Oh, the light is red. I'm just going to go anyway. I don't care. Right. Like you're going to have an accident, right? There are many things where actually doing what most people do is correct. I'd say in most situations in day-to-day life, if you do what most people do, you'll like, it's the right thing to do. But then there are scenarios where that's absolutely not the case. And so I think people need to be discerning to determine where, okay, is the majority thing the thing that's right and the thing that's working and the thing that's producing results? If so, cool. Okay. In that case, there's nothing wrong with going with the quote unquote herd or being a follower. But then there are situations where actually, the majority is not doing well, or the majority is not getting good results, or just the majority is objectively incorrect about something. That can happen. And that can be an uncomfortable position to be in, because imagine you're in a room of like, I don't know, 100 people, and 98% of them think one thing, and you think something like that's like an uncomfortable position. Even if you're in a room, like let's take opinions out of this matter. Let's say you walk into a room and there's 1,000 people and all of them are wearing blue, and you walk in and you're wearing yellow or orange because you're a Bitcoiner. You will feel weird. You'll feel uncomfortable, even though like maybe there was no message that you're supposed to wear a blue shirt. You don't know why they're wearing blue shirts, but you will feel uncomfortable, right? People are going to be looking at you. Who's this person who's this person in the orange shirt, right? Everyone else is wearing blue. Just that alone, there will be people who would leave immediately. They'd go put on a blue shirt and then they'll come back. They don't even know why everyone's wearing blue, right? But just to fit in and not feel that discomfort, only a small percentage of people would be like, hey, cool, well, I'm going to keep wearing my orange shirt. And maybe I'll talk to people and I'll find out why everyone else is wearing blue and I'm wearing orange. So it's totally natural and normal. And it's part of our survival toolkit to go with the majority, fit in with the tribe, fit in with the herd. But we need to be cautious that we don't do that at times where it can potentially get us wrecked or get us in trouble or make us, create unhealthy decisions or bad decisions for our families. So there's a little bit of a balance there because, like I said, even the people who are the most independent thinkers in the world, in many ways, they're still not. And if they weren't, they wouldn't really be able to function in society.
It's interesting because I think I mentioned that on a podcast previously, but I was always uncomfortable being placed in a group of people. So I always wanted to be not with, like, if someone said like, oh, you're a swimmer, like I was uncomfortable being judged by, oh, you are in the swimmer category, or you are like an engineer. I never liked those labels. And I was always the guy that shows up when there was a dress code with something else, just because I really did not want to adhere by a dress code. I was like, I would have the thing on that I always have on. Sometimes even like if the dress code suited to my everyday clothing, I sometimes even went out of my way and found something different to wear. But that's maybe just.
Well, let me ask you a question, Robin. How many people do you know who run a daily Bitcoin interview podcast?
I don't know anyone. Like literally, like I don't know if there's any other one that do it every day from Monday to Sunday. Like maybe I've missed someone, but I haven't found someone. There's a lot of people that do daily podcasts, but not a daily Bitcoin interview podcast, or like not even in general interview podcast. I haven't found one, but I haven't also not looked that deep.
There we go. So my point is simply you're an anomaly. You're an outlier. You're not quote unquote normal in that regard. So, if we were doing statistics, we'd be like, okay, that data point doesn't count.
I don't count. I have an interesting one. Do you think money is somehow influenced the behavior of the people, how independent and clear they think? And maybe one example to that of like, if you're on a gold standard and you're Europe and you come to Africa and all of a sudden you see, oh, they're using those stones as money, or you can go back home, produce those stones and actually like enslave them with their own money. So it kind of makes a weird thing where the one with the better money might also get the power and get the more, how should I say it? They have the better chance of developing a mindset of conquering, a mindset of that benefits someone in their life. How do you look at the influence of money on a society, if it's a good money versus if it's a quote unquote bad money?
That's a really good question. I think the most obvious influence is how it changes people's time preference or priority of short-term versus long-term thinking. So I can give like tangible examples of this. So for example, my family background, my origin is from Nigeria. And in Nigeria, the currency they use is called the naira. Now, when my parents were children, I believe the naira was about equal to the British pound. It was about 1 naira to 1 pound at its inception. I think when Nigeria became independent, I think it was literally 1 naira was the equivalent of 1 pound. Today, I don't even know what the exchange rate is today. You know what? I'm actually gonna look this up because I want to be accurate here. So today, I'm going to look up the official exchange rate, which is different to what you would get on the street. Just give me a moment. Okay. Today it says, I just checked, according to Google, today 1 pound is 2,052 naira. Okay. So it's gone from 1 to 1 to 1 to 2,050. I remember being in Nigeria not even 20 years ago. And I remember when it was 1 pound was about 500. So it's gone from that to, 2,000. But anyway, in countries where you have extremely high inflation rates, you could look at Turkey, for example. You could look at many countries in Africa. You can look at many countries, I think, even in South America, where they don't just have inflation in the 5, 6, 8, 10% range, but we're talking 30%, 40%, 50%. In some places, I mean, I remember when I was about 14 years old and Zimbabwe was going through its hyperinflation. And I think the value of the Zimbabwean dollar was dropping. It was getting cut in half something like every 30 seconds, right? Like their inflation rate was, I think, in the billions of percent, right? My friend was coming into school with $100 trillion banknotes and they're worth absolutely nothing. Okay. But anyway, the point I'm making is if you have a very high inflation rate, then it becomes very difficult to think and plan long term. Because think about it. If I pay you, say I paid you $10,000 and next week, say by next week, your $10,000 is going to be worth $5,000. Say every week the value cuts in half. What are you going to do? Of course, you're going to take that $10,000. You're going to spend it immediately, right? You're going to spend it. You're not going to save it because you save it and then 1 year later it's worth nothing. So what you'll find is in many places, in many nations where there's very high inflation, people think very, very short term. And this affects everything. This can increase crime rates because, again, people are just thinking very short term. It makes things much more difficult to plan for family. Obviously, it's much harder to invest in businesses and anything like it keeps economies very poor because you need at least some degree of stability in order for people to be able to plan long term. And that affects individuals, it affects families, it affects businesses, it affects the governments themselves. It affects everybody. If you don't have at least a somewhat stable currency, even in fiat terms, right? For the purposes of this conversation, I'm considering the pound and the euro and the US dollar to be relatively stable. If you don't have that, then you're really kind of screwed. That's why in many of these nations that people will save their money in dollars or they'll save their money in British pounds or something like that. Because if they just use their local currencies, then they're in massive trouble. And this is the reason why in many of these countries, they're actually more interested in Bitcoin than people are in some more economically developed countries because they're able to see, yes, sure, Bitcoin has some volatility, but if you were to compare it to their local currencies, it's actually far more stable. So the volatility doesn't seem as aggressive as it is against, say, the US dollar or the British pound. So I would say that how it affects time preference and everything that's downstream of that would be the most obvious example to me of how the type of money and the soundness of money actually affects human behavior day to day.
Interesting. I love that. I have one more topic that I kind of want to get into the podcast as we're coming closer to the end, and I teased it in the starting of the podcast where we talked about okay, dude. This was kind of my first touch point to you, and I want to close this off with exactly that. And if I got it right, you kind of got kicked off Twitter back in the day because you said okay, dude, and it was deemed, I think, hateful was the word they said it was, and now you're back on Twitter. And you're also an artist, and you mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast where you first got started. It was a very different world to now with streaming, social media, podcasting, all that. Maybe you can give us some overview of like how you saw the rise of social media and how this was also how different it is now kind of for an artist to be in this world than it was when you got started, and maybe also a little bit of like freedom of speech, how you see it currently with the state of freedom of speech with being an artist and being on social media and being kind of dependent on those platforms. Now you're back on X. Elon Musk got it got it back and kind of restored it a little bit.
Yeah, I went from being kicked off Twitter to becoming acquainted with and even interviewing the CEO of the company. So how things turn around, huh? Gosh, there's a lot there. So first of all, I've been on social media since 2004. which is crazy to say out loud. I've been on social media for over 20 years. I started my Facebook account in 2004, and I was on MySpace before that. So yeah, 2004 is when I joined social media. I've seen it through a lot of different iterations. I've seen Facebook go from a very niche college, university-based app to, well, not even app, website. It didn't have an app at the time, to, becoming the giant that is Meta with billions of users and buying up Instagram and WhatsApp and Oculus. I've seen Twitter go from being, I remember when people used to send tweets by sending text messages, and there was like no retweet feature, and people used to, I've been on Twitter since 2009. I created my account. So what's that? 16 years, June 2009, I believe I started my account. And obviously now it's morphed into X. So, YouTube, I started my YouTube account in 2006, although I wasn't really like using it actively, but I've been on YouTube for almost 20 years. It's pretty bonkers, man. So, man, what's the question? How has social media changed what it's like for an artist?
Yeah, like especially from an artist perspective and an independent author as you are, it's really interesting how also your life as an artist completely changed with the streaming things and getting more an independent way. Because now it's more about, and I'm just guessing, I'm not an artist, but it's more about like being an independent creator, and you can make a lot more without labels. You're way more. It's way more on the artist also to market it, all those things because of social media.
Yeah, I think with social media, I think it's been a double-edged sword. I think it's helped in some ways. I think it's made it easier for artists to go direct to fan or direct to consumer. But then with that, I think the best time was kind of was the early stages of social media, when when people were still buying music, but a lot of people were on social media. I think that was kind of like the best of both worlds. The streaming model is very good for some artists, but I think it's actually devalued music quite considerably. And I think that's actually affected the quality of the music, because so few people actually buy music now. People used to buy an album and like really listen to it, whether they bought it on vinyl or tape or CD. Like, you'd buy an album and you would like rinse that album. And artists knew that, so they do their best to put together a real cohesive body of work. They'd care about the album covers, make sure everything is packaged well, and so on. Now, the ease of accessibility, obviously from a customer standpoint, there's some advantages to it. There's something nice of like, I can just pull out my phone and type in any artist, any song in the world, and boom, I can just listen to it as much as I want for not literally for free. Well, sometimes for free with YouTube, but like, let's say for almost free. Let's say for, I don't know, $10 a month or whatever the case may be. So from a consumer standpoint, it has a lot of benefits. I think for the artists themselves, though, unless you're getting huge numbers of streams, then like, you're not going to make much money directly from music in the way that perhaps you could independently before. So it very much depends on the artist, depends on the kind of music they make. It depends on what their goal is. It depends on their business model. I'd say now it's harder to just be like a pure musician who just wants to make music and just focus on the music and just make your living through selling and performing music. I think it's gotten harder for a lot of people like that. For people who are willing to use music more as a marketing vehicle and then monetize in other ways, it can be very good and lucrative for them. But like I said, it's very much a double-edged sword. It's not all good and it's not all bad. I think a lot of people who are not artists, not musicians themselves, they don't really see the downside, and they don't really understand how the music economy works, and they don't think, oh, well, let's say, for example, let's even just think of the numbers. How much is a Spotify premium per month? It's about 15 euros, something like that.
Yeah, I think something like that. Yeah.
Well, 12 pounds, 15 euros. Okay. Let's say it's that. Let's just say it's 15 euros or 12 pounds. I think that's around the same. And let's say, you listen to 50 different artists regularly. Even if you just kind of do the math, obviously Spotify takes a big cut, labels take a big cut. Like by the time you do the math, like even if you were like streaming an artist to death, they're probably going to get like a few cents. Just because the way the math works, right? Whereas, to be honest, even with the old music business model, when people were selling albums, if they were on a big label, even if you paid, 15 euros for an album, like the deals were so crap that an artist might only be getting like €1 to €2 or $1 to $2 or something like that. But for independent artists, it would have been a lot higher. So, the economic side of it still, as far as I'm concerned, it really hasn't quite been worked out yet. I don't think that streaming as it is now is going to be the sort of final form of the music industry and the final way that artists decide to monetize and get their music out to their fans. But we'll see. At the same time, look, if you're more entrepreneurial and you're an innovator, there's always going to be opportunity. And I've seen lots of artists like in the past decade. Some of them have probably taken off in ways they wouldn't have in the old era. But then I think there are also artists who would have really survived and thrived in the 80s, 90s, 2000s who are struggling now because of the way the consumption style has changed, just because it doesn't suit the music they make. It doesn't suit the type of business that they normally operate in. So some people are definitely thriving. But I think, others suffer. So it's a bit complex. It's a little bit complicated. I don't think it's, but at the same time, like most things, I don't complain about it. It's like, okay, well, here's where we are. Here are the tools available. Let's just make the most of what we can do. If you need to alternate, if you need to diversify a little bit, I've diversified in many times. In many ways, I used to just be a rapper. Now I'm a rapper. I run a podcast. I've written books. I do speaking. I do coaching. Like I do a lot of things. I'm more than just a rapper at this stage. So, there are always opportunities, but I don't think it's as straightforward as it used to be.
Yeah, it might be more complicated. Like it's like the world is always changing, and those who adapt the best way to the changing environments are probably the ones that benefit the best. We have an ending routine, two parts actually. One part is one question that is always the same question for each and every one of my guests. And this second one I'll come later. So the first question is always the same question for each guest. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff. What should I go for? How to improve your mindset and maximize your potential in this world.
I think that's a good one. I think we already touched on that a little bit, and it's so important. I also love that this proof of work mindset and this low time preference mindset is really coming into this Bitcoin scene on average. So I think I love that one. And we have one more question, which comes from the previous guest. So we have an end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asks you the question, what's your someday project that you haven't told anyone about, like learning a guitar, building a wooden tree house, or whatever what comes to your mind?
Doing a world tour, music and or speaking.
I would love that. You have to come to Vienna then also.
One day, man. One day.
Then thank you so much, Zuby, for taking the time and being here. Before I let you go, where can people find you, your music, your books, and your podcast?
Sure thing. So you can find me at zubymusic.com. All my links to everything I do are on there. And you can find me on all social media at Zuby Music. That is ZUBY Music. Same handle on X, YouTube, Instagram, everything else. Just search Zuby Music and you will find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zuby, for taking the time. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.